And we are live! Hello, everybody! This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. I am very, very happy today. I'm just going to do a quick little hello and let you know that we have Chris Barron and Rajan LaRocca in the house today. Woo! So I'm going to go ahead and let them take it away, tell them more about your books and themselves as authors, and then also, too, if you want to support these amazing authors, which why wouldn't you, we're going to have the link pinned in the comment section for where you can get their books and book plates and all that good stuff. I'm going to go ahead and disappear out of here and leave you in these two authors' amazing hands. Have a good event,
guys. Bye. Here we are.
Woohoo! It's almost like last year, like not at all like last year.
Just not at all like it, but
yeah. If you had told me last year that this was how we would be doing a reunion, I would have been like, no, there's no way. That's crazy. But here we are.
I know. Last year we did this great book tour, and it was just on the go and on the move. And but it's fun to be at Mysterious Galaxy because this is where I had my actual launch for All of Me, and so it just feels fitting. And I'm glad we're here together. So I'll let you start, but you can introduce yourself and
sure.
Talk about your 1 million books.
No. I'm Rajan LaRocca. I am an author of middle grade novels and picture books, and I live in the Boston area. I'm also a doctor. That's what I do during the daytime usually. And I'm the author of MIDSUMMER'S MAYHEM, which is my debut middle grade. It came out last June, I believe on the same day as, oh, you were so sweet. I think it came out on the same day as Chris's book, All of Me. So that was June 11th of 2019. And I can tell you a little bit about the book for those of you who haven't heard about it yet. So you can tell maybe from the cover that it has a lot of baked goods. So it's about this girl named Mimi. She's 11 years old and she loves to bake, but she is the youngest of 4 siblings, and her 3 older siblings are older than her. They're teenagers and they're super talented at all kinds of things. And Mimi feels a little bit left out in her own family and a little bit invisible. And but then she learns about a local baking contest, and she thinks if she could just win that contest, she could finally prove that she's not the least talented member of her family. But then her dad, who is a food writer, comes back from a business trip, and he can't tell the difference between delicious food and disgusting. And he just like eats everything in sight. And so without his help, Mimi doesn't know how she's going to win the contest. Then she follows some mysteriously familiar music into the woods behind her house and meets a boy named Vic, who also loves to bake. And together they like gather all these interesting herbs and flowers from the forest and bake with them. And then everyone around her starts acting really, really strange. So Mimi's got to figure out what's wrong with everyone. Can she fix it? And can she win the baking contest? So it can basically be described as an Indian American mashup of A Midsummer Night's Dream and Cupcake Wars. How about?
That's amazing. Do you want to mention just a little bit about what you have coming up next, or do you want to?
You know what? Why don't we just talk about all the stuff that's like? Why don't we talk about those books, and then at the end we can talk about all the stuff that's coming up next. Yeah. How about you, Chris? Tell me all about All of Me.
So this is my middle grade novel in verse, All of Me. It is the story of 13-year-old Ari Rosenzweig, who's a kid who's been teased and bullied about his weight his whole life. And so the summer before his bar mitzvah, he decides to make a change. And it's really an adventure story. It's a friendship story about some really tough times for this kid, Ari. And his mother is an artist and decides to sort of take a place away from it all during the summer as the parents are kind of having trouble. And Ari, along with a group of his friends, tried to make a big change. And at first it seems to be all about a diet, but of course it's much more than that. And it is kind of the internal and external changes that he goes through the summer is to become really more of who he is. So, and I can't.
And it's a beautiful book. It's like just an absolutely beautiful book, and so different from almost everything I read last year. And I read a lot last year. I read a lot of middle grade, but I really have to say it just stood out. It is so beautifully written. Ari is such a great character. Like we really root for him. And I have to, I mean, I have to say it was surprising when I read it, Chris. Not that I like expected anything bad, but it was surprising how different Ari was from like a lot of characters that you see in books, like for kids. He's a gentle character, and he's kind of like vehemently gentle, which I think is so unusual and just so cool.
Well, we equally loved your book, and I thought your book was such a fresh, exciting book to read. And I know my whole family, they might be watching right now, we loved it. I mean, we read it together as a family, and I read it on my own, and it's just such a kind of a gripping story in its own way, and I love how you describe it so perfectly. Every time I read it, I want to bake and also eat sweets and also read Shakespeare. So it's a really, really inspiring book. So can you talk a little bit, I mean, just more specifically about the inspiration for the book?
Yeah. When it came, the inspiration came from when I was a memory from when I was a kid. So my dad would sometimes travel, and he didn't travel that often, but when he did, sometimes he'd be gone for like a week. And I was a strange kid with like an overactive imagination. So I was like, what if the person who came back wasn't actually my dad, but somebody who looked exactly like him? Like, how would I know? And so I had like these little quiz questions that only my real dad would know the answer to. And it was always my dad, thank goodness. But when it came time to write a book, I was like, well, what if there's a girl whose dad comes back from a business trip and he's acting really weird and there's something wrong with him, but then she's the only one who notices. And then I was like, well, what's wrong with him? And I was like, well, clearly something magical is wrong with him, because otherwise, like, why not? Like, you know, I love fantasy. And then I was like, well, why is she the only one who notices? And I was like, oh, maybe she's part of a big family and everyone's kind of going all over the place and doing all their things and they're all busy. And she's the youngest one and she's the one that's closest to him and she's the one that's waiting for him to come back. So that when he comes back and starts acting strange, she's like, wait a minute, there's something funny going on. Yeah. And then I combined that with kind of I am very much inspired by where I live. I live in Concord, Massachusetts, and we have lots of conservation land with just woods and creeks and rivers, and it's just really beautiful. We walk our dog out there all the time. And so I thought something magical would happen in the woods. And then I was like, oh, A Midsummer Night's Dream plays into this. So I know who the magical people are. And then I won't, for anybody who hasn't read it, I won't spoil, but there is a link, a direct link from A Midsummer Night's Dream to my story. And once I like remembered that, I was like, that's it. That's what I have to do. So yeah. And then the baking was just because I love baking.
That's fair. That's fair.
And how about you, Chris?
Everyone should know that even before events we did on our book tour, we did baking. Like our kids were baking with Rajani and Joey McCall and others. Like we were all baking together to bring to the event. So that was a big highlight, like having that food with us.
That was so much. That was really, really fun. I know baking with kids is just like one of the best things ever.
Well, yeah. And I think like so much writing these books, especially kid literature in general, is about giving. Not like a look at us giving kind of way, but just the idea that, you know, we're trying to pour out stories that we love, that change us, that maybe change others. And then like the food just kind of is a tangible moment to just give it, you know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, I do have to say, I think that was like one of my like, okay, I don't think I ever imagined that like I'd be baking with kids of friends, and like that would be part of the thing that I was doing when I decided that I wanted to write. You know what I mean? It's such a wild it's such a wild concept. But I remember that those moments in Joy's house actually, and we were just like, right. Oh my, we were like looking around, like just filling up with joy. It was
what's happening.
So
yeah, oh, so fun.
It was amazing.
So for all of me, just kind of similar to you, what inspired it was, and I like to say this line because it sounds very cool to say it, that the LA Times called it a fictional retelling.
Nice.
And I love that because they gave me some language to sort of use for what it is. It really is like a fictional retelling of my own experience. You know, growing up and dealing with body image issues and things that were direct, things that were indirect, family culture, eating culture, diet culture, just they press down on us in ways that even in the most loving home, it's very hard to push away. And of course, my mother is you know, a pretty well-known artist, and I lived in that kind of artist environment. And I lived for a time in 8th grade in the Bay Area, 7th and 8th grade. So deeply impacted by setting. In fact, the book takes place in the Bay Area. You know, it takes place in San Francisco, in Mill Valley, and Stinson Beach, where the characters have the Galaxy, and that, or the gallery, and that's a big part of, you know, my life. That's what I did one summer. So I really was able to kind of plug into my own memories, and of course then craft this fictional story. And anyone who knows me knows that I love fantasy, that I am a Tolkien, Lewis, you name the fantasy book, I absolutely love those stories, that hero journey, that coming of age. And so it was really fun to do, I mean, use your words, like a mashup of personal experience, but making into this kind of hero's journey of what would happen. But what was interesting for me was doing the verse, because I think writing in verse provides this kind of access to the internal landscape of a character's mind in a way that maybe prose doesn't always do, in a less burdening way. And so, because the story was very much about, and as you mentioned, like kind of a gentle character dealing with very kind of almost violent circumstances. What happens in the kid's mind? And so I wanted to try to address this, because so many kids are going through things, but we know middle grade kids can't always just express like, this is how I feel today.
Right.
They often will, if you ask them how they're doing, their answer will be fine. But inside is like a whole storm of issues, concerns, fun things, good things. But so I wanted to really take on. So I felt really inspired to one, write this story, but also to feel it and maybe try to connect with young readers in that way as well. So that was pretty inspiring for me to write. But we did have, I just want to shift over to talking a little bit about debut year, because we did have our book tour, but also we got to debut together, which in the publishing world is a really fun thing. And we were part of an incredible group called Novel 19s. And if anyone's out there, what's up? And so, because yes, here we are achieving a dream of publishing books. At the same time, it's a lot of work. And I think we're going to talk a little more about that. But debut year was really fantastic. And so like, I don't know, what was one of your favorite things? What was the best thing about debut year for you?
Oh man, there were so many awesome things about. I have to tell you, I think the best thing about debut year was getting to meet other debut authors. So I think the hilarious thing about this whole situation about like publishing in general is that I feel like every year there's a new crop of new authors and none of us know anything. We all just show up and we're like, hi, I think they're publishing a book. That's all I know. And like, it is the funniest thing because we're all just like, and you know, there is wisdom passed on from other authors who have done this before, but there's no like handbook. Like nobody hands you anything and to help you understand what to expect. And so I think there's something very special about being in a debut group together and you bond in a way that is like really funny. It's like when you're like a new parent and you're like, I don't know, like how many times a day are they supposed to pee? I have no idea. And you just talk to other new parents and you compare, like, this happened with me, is this happening with you? And it's like so funny. So I feel like debut year is like that too. And especially, you know, meeting you, Chris, you're such a lovely person and your family is so wonderful. My entire family are fans of your family. Like, it's really funny.
Likewise.
Right before I got on here, Lou was like, say hi to Chris. It was so cute. And yeah, I think that was what, like, I think it is hands down because it is, there are lots of wonderful things that happen debut year, but for me, it is like the human connections that you make that you're just like, oh man, like now we're gonna be friends forever. So, or else.
Yeah. No, I agree, and likewise with your family, and but also like so many friends that we've made, and you know that we have in common, and so many people. I mean, for me, that was one of the best things as well about debut year, and I'm gonna mix in one of the other questions we talked about. Like, it was also the most surprising thing. For me was just because I not to use a sports metaphor, but I'm going to, but like, you know, because I've been like an athlete for a long time. Like after you do a race or you play a game where you're so tired, you know, and that's like writing the book. you know, to walk into a place where other people have experienced that without a lot of conversation, you can really connect with. Pretty powerful thing.
Yeah.
And that was so meaningful to me. And then to develop friendships, it was just definitely one of the best parts. I mean, aside from the absolute dream of seeing your book like in a bookstore or at a library or in the hands of a kid reading it, or a parent a story time, I mean, that is the best thing. But also this other deeper part. I don't know, was there a surprising thing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest surprise for me was the knowledge that your book, once it's published, it like has its own life that has nothing to do with you sometimes, right? Like you made this story and you kind of put it out in the world, and like this happened in moments when I actually got to meet young readers who had read the book. And sometimes at the event, like that summer when we were out there, sometimes I went to an event and there were kids who had already read the book, and I was like, oh, okay. And they just like, they brought so much to the story themselves, and I was like, what? Like, yeah, like that's magic, right? That's like us as kids reading books that we loved, and we brought all kinds of stuff to the stories that we read, and like it was happening in real time in front of me. And I have to tell you, like, that was the biggest shock to me. It was so wonderful and like so startling at the same time. And yeah, and so that's what I hold on to.
Totally agree. In fact, at Mysterious Galaxy, when I did my book release, when I got there early and we were like, had like all this food in hands, and my kids were there and friends were helping, a kid walked up to me, an 8th grader, who had just read the book that morning. It just came out, and it was so surprising to me. He wanted to ask me all these questions. I mean, that was also a best moment, but very, very surprising. Like, oh, this is a real thing now, you know, and then I'll always remember that as part of the debut year.
I know.
Were there any worse things, or that? Sorry, I just curious. I just want to know, because we're so positive, you know. I mean, I don't know. You're gonna ask me.
So I think that, like, yes, there has to be some worse moments, right? Like, obviously, I think what's hard is that in publishing in general, I think, because I think both of us tend to think about the positive, like we tend to be optimistic, positive people, so that's what we tend to focus on. But I think what's hard is that in dark moments or tired moments or like just like exhausted moments, you're like, oh man, like there's always like something else. There's always something else that you wanted to do that maybe didn't happen, or like that you're looking forward to, and then it, you know, maybe it's not, like it didn't pan out, or, you know, just like the lack of knowledge about lots of things. You're like, I don't know, is this good? Like, how good is it? I have no idea. You know, it's just hard to gauge that. And I think that I don't spend too much time thinking about that stuff, because I like to just, you know, focus on the stuff that is happening and, you know, dwell on that, because goodness knows we have few enough moments of joy in the world as it is. So, but yeah, I think that there's always something that you could feel bad about. There's always some review somewhere that someone is like, this is dumb, and you're like, okay, you know.
Yeah,
because it's like your child. You're like, don't call it dumb. Just say you didn't like it. It's okay. You know?
I know.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, I agree with you. And I think too, for me, it's not the worst. It was like the hardest thing. Like, you know, you're a doctor, you have a family, and I work as a professor at City College, the best college in San Diego, San Diego City College. And, you know, and I love my job there, and I've loved it for a long time. And so I'm very invested there. And of course, I'm with my family. And so, and of course now I have this like brand new passion. And I say brand new in the sense that debut years kind of solidifies like you're on this road, and it's a place I've been dreaming about getting to and wanting to be there. And so it was very hard to manage, and it still kind of is, you know, as a family, as a career, like making sure that I'm not letting down this group or this thing, and learning how to manage a little bit more, because I can't stop writing. I mean, this is what I'm doing, you know. And so I think it's not the worst, but maybe the hardest.
It is,
you know?
yes. And I think that also it's easy to get caught up in all the hoopla of debut year and all the things you're trying to do, and then like just sit there and go, wait a minute, when am I going to write? Like, I have to write the next thing. Oh my goodness. Like it can be a scramble sometimes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And writing can be hard. I mean, sometimes.
Very. It's very hard. Yes, especially when you're working on time management of any kind. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right. You ready for a weird question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like weird questions.
Ready? Like I was so inspired by your setting, right? Your Northern California setting for all of me. Chris, are you ready?
Oh, no.
You're a tree. What kind of tree would you be?
Oh my goodness. If I was a tree, what kind of tree would I be?
I told you I had some weird ones coming up.
What's so funny about this question, see, of course, here I am. I'm not going to go on some kind of long trail about trees, but if you can ask like Corey, like other our friends, I often will message people like, tell me about the trees in your area. Like,
Nice.
So I do a lot of research on trees, but I would definitely be like a redwood in Muir Woods. Because I would aspire to be like wise like the redwoods and like standing strong and providing shade. And redwoods are such a core part of the ecosystem. Like, you know, it's a desire, like I want to be part of a community and rooted in community. It's a value I have. So redwood.
Yes, and also they're super tall.
That's right, I'm pretty tall. That's true. That's part of who I am. Yes.
No, but I can say you have that strength. You do. I can see you as a redwood. I like that, Chris.
That's kind. Okay, well, I have one for you then.
Okay.
Okay, one of the things that I totally love about your book, this book is so cinematic. Like it is, like when you're reading it, it's like scenes from a movie, it feels like. So tell me who plays Mimi in the movie version of this book.
Honestly, I have no idea who plays Mimi. I mean, honestly, so she's named after my own daughter, right? But my daughter is now too old to play, you know, an 11-year-old. So I don't know. I mean, like if it ever became a movie, I would want them to pick like just a real kid, right? Like a real kid who is just that age and has all the same like loves and dreams and insecurities of a kid that age, right? And just, you know, and play her, you know. My daughter jokes that like the two older sisters and Mimi all kind of have aspects of her own personality. And I it's like I took her and I split her into three. And it's very funny. And then clearly the older brother in the story has a lot in common with my son. So yeah, my kids are like, you didn't have to go too far to dream up these kids. And I was like, I know. That's right. Imitation is the sincerest form.
It's so true. And also, I mean, I think we, you know, I know as writers, we hear this, and I know I talk to my students about this, like this very old adage of write what you know. And people often say, like, that I talk to, like, that's so boring though, I don't do anything. But it's not true. Nothing about your life is boring. Like everyone's life is so intricate, complex, just like you described. Go.
No, and well, the thing is, Chris, right, is, you know, as I've gotten a little bit more kind of deep into this whole writing and publishing thing, it becomes obvious to me that what we're doing is taking real emotions, often from our lives, right? I mean, and not necessarily specific situations, but emotions that we have felt, which are universal, right? And wrapping a story around that. And that is, I think, what makes you love a book, because you can tell that there's something real at the core of it, even though it's all make-believe and there's fun stuff going on, or, you know, this never really happened to anybody. That's fine. But the heart of it is the truth, which I find so cool. It
is. And I love in your book, and I know certainly I'm striving for this in the verse part of the, you know, writing in poetry, is the musicality of the line to express that emotion, to express that truth, so that, like, just like in Shakespeare and the pentameter, you know, like it's meant to mirror the heartbeat so that it sinks in, so that you memorize it, so you feel it. And I think your book does that so well. Like, and I know there's a lot about music in your book, and that's how you write. I know I try to write that way, so that the truth can be almost like a song in our texts, you know, and it's a lot of work.
It is, and you do that, like, it feels effortless in your book, right? With the poetry, it just feels like it just kind of like came right from your brain and just like landed on a page, and it was just like there was no there was no struggle or anything like that.
But it's tension though, because you want to get the story out and just tell it. But then as writers, you're always like reeling back and saying, okay, how can I express this in a way that really gets into it? So challenging.
Yeah, but really cool, like really cool. Okay, so what is up with your hats, Chris? Do you always wear a hat?
Okay, so let me just, that was my example. That wasn't
we
a real
promised that we were going to
thing.
answer this question.
Oh my gosh. That was only my example. Okay, here's the thing. Because unless there's thousands of people watching this, I feel safe to say my answer.
It's just you and me here.
Just us and Constance, right?
Yes.
So I'm a very introverted person. And one of the ways that oh boy, how do I explain this? For me to settle my nerves, I give myself something to focus on. So I wear a hat, and somehow that like gives me like license just to be, I don't know, more energetic, more open. And it's kind of like a little ritual that I use to get myself out there. It used to be different. I just want to say, I used to wear flip-flops to poetry readings because flip-flops gave me that same experience. Like I felt more relaxed.
Nice.
And so now though that's irrelevant in this world because
no one can see your flip-flops.
That's right. I know.
That's awesome. Okay, I didn't know that.
I know, isn't that strange? So it's not that I'm nervous. I mean, I'll take, and I go to work, I take it off, but I think it's just something that this small intimate audience can know about.
I love it.
I have a question for you, and then maybe there's some audience questions I think that I'm looking at this team. This might not be as exciting of a question, but can you give, like, because you're so busy, because you're a very busy doctor during a very busy time in the world for doctors, and you're writing and producing so much, can you, like, what is a life hack that you have adopted that gives you time to write?
Okay, that's a great life hack. Okay,
I mean, I know you have a lot, but any.
So I used to tell you, I used to think that I needed a certain chunk of time in order to write. Like I needed to like get in the mode and write, like have a nice setting and just like, a place to think and a nice pen. And when I first started trying to write seriously, like with an eye towards publication, I had like 2 elementary and middle school age kids, and I was working, and like I had to cook and like do all the mom things, right? And so I ignored the idea that I needed a significant chunk of time. I literally was just like, wherever I am, if I have a couple of minutes, I'm just going to write down ideas, or I'm going to work on this paragraph, or I'm going to do whatever. And so I got like, I think it just helps your brain stay more agile. Like you're just like, okay, I got 5 minutes. I guess I can work on 3 sentences in 5 minutes. No problem. The kids would be in a piano lesson. I'd just be out there going, doo, 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 doo. Or like I'd be in pickup line. I'd be like talking to myself. I used to record videos of like my chin until my kids were like, Mom, there's a voice memo app, okay? Like you don't have to record a video if you're just trying to listen to yourself talk. And I was like, okay, thank you, children. So yeah, so now I just try and make, and now my kids are older and like I have more time, and they, whatever, when they were in high school, like they would do homework after dinner and I would just work, I would write and my husband would work. And so, I found more time, but even like now, like I'll be at the office and then I'll come home and I'll only have like, I don't know, 45 minutes before I have to like do something else. And I'm like, why not? It's 45 minutes, just do something, it doesn't have to be 3 hours of time. So that's my life hack.
I love that. No, go. What else?
I also find
yeah,
that working on different things during a day, like you being a professor and like you working on your novel project and you working on a poem, like those things are good because they give you like a mental break in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, totally life-giving. And I hope my students, if you're watching this, that you're getting this. Because so much of it, I hear a lot about like writer's block, and it's just sort of ignoring writer's block and just going for it. I love what you're saying. I mean, That's so true. And I was in the pickup line lots of times doing videos of my chin or drag and dictate, which by the way is a nightmare for writing poems because it's big block text. But I wanted to get my ideas down because you know this, if you don't record it, you lose everything.
Yes.
I'll remember this. Nope, you do not remember it later. So
yes. Yes. And like the 4 a.m. wake up where you're like, that's it, that's the line, that's what I have to say. And then you're like, ah, and you know, 9 times out of 10, it's like makes no sense. But like that 1 time out of 10, you're like, that was it. That was actually the thing I was waiting for.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I love that feeling too when the thing hits. Anyway, it's so good. Okay, so there's a looks like a question there, and I'm looking at the time and thinking maybe we could answer it.
Yeah.
This is from Debbie. Do you have any advice we can share for young writers who resist revising their work? Such a good question. Let me just take a stab at it, and then if you.
Well, you are the English professor, so I think you should explain this first.
So even this week in my creative writing class this summer, where we're talking about revision, and it is not a small thing to first of all to ask a young writer to revise something. I feel like it's like very sacred work in the sense that it's not a given. Like anything important like that, where you're going back to something that you've created, you know, it takes some guidance and instruction. And so it doesn't take a lot of time, but I just mean like really taking it seriously. But I can't stress enough like the joy of revising. And so my advice is that try to find joy in it. You never ever lose your original piece. Like you have the thing you wrote. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to ruin it. Just make a new document. I don't know, paste it in and try stuff. And then just see what works. I mean, I can remember typing on a typewriter. Maybe you can too.
Oh, yes.
Right? Different world. Like it's a new world. So painful. So I would say just knowing that you're not locked in. You can try. I mean, this is probably relatable to Rajani, to you and other writers out there, that you probably have like 50 drafts of one thing at any given time because they're progressing. So find joy in revision and just go for it. I know that there's a sense where from a young writer's perspective or even a student perspective, like they write something and they just want to be like, I'm done, you know, but the creative writing process is really about finishing a draft of something and actually just marking that time and celebrating that, and then knowing, okay, I'm going to come back to it and eventually get to a place where you're not revising that work anymore. So I don't know. Yes. What do you think? I mean,
to me, I love revision because that's the part where you get to make the thing, where you get to really craft the thing that you want this book to be or this piece of writing to be. And a first draft to me is very painful because I'm like, this is not good, and I just have to keep going with it. But revision to me is like, here's my chance to really like select each word, like make sure that each line makes sense, make sure that I have the right emotion in the right place. But I have hacks for this too, because a lot of times with revision, so you know, there are kind of 3 ways you literally need to see something in a different way, right? So one is time. So like give it a couple of weeks and then go back to it. And when you read it again, it's gonna feel different to you. And then you're gonna say, oh, I could fix this. I think this isn't working, or I really like that. I'm gonna hold on to that, and we're gonna, you know, build off of that. Second is a partner, right? A critique partner, especially somebody who's never read any of this before, who is just coming to it with no ideas, preconceived notions, and they can give you insight into like, this part confused me, or I really like this, and I think this is going to happen, and these are my questions. So awesome. And if you can't have access to either of those things, honestly, my biggest hacks are read it aloud. In fact, Word will read it out loud to you, like the robot will read it to you, and it is like one of the funniest things ever. And you'll be like, oh, that's like, no, that's not at all what I wanted to say. Or you just read it out loud. And then finally, I would say change the font. So like change the font and the size, and it'll feel like a different piece of work. So that's like fun revision tip. So Rebecca is asking, I know you both have new books coming out soon, but how has writing been during the pandemic? It seems that authors are either writing a ton or having a hard time focusing on their work. What do you think, Chris?
Rebecca, that's such a good question. I want to hear your answer, Rebecca, but yeah, wow. Okay. I don't exactly know how to answer it because, like many people, I'm probably suffering a little bit from the worldwide depression that everyone's feeling in some sense. So I'm not exactly sure what day it is or what time it is at all, much less, you know, how much I've written. But I have to say that writing is giving me life, that focusing on projects, focusing on writing projects and being able to share those with friends and critique partners and my literary agent, or working on projects with my editor, my critique group, it's keeping me going. And I have just, and I think, I mean, this, I don't know how this will sound, but I've been through a lot in my life. And so I kind of rely on that resilience to push forward. Having said that, I don't think I've produced nearly as much as I might have if this wasn't going on. I don't think I've been certainly prolific in any way. I think I'm doing what I can. I'm finding the good in it, but I've lowered my own expectations on myself because at first I thought, look at this gift of time, and I think it is. But I was being really hard on myself in the beginning, and now I think I've just kind of relented. Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you have coming out soon, Chris? As a little aside.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, so I'm very excited. I think it's going to be next June. I have my next middle grade novel in verse coming out called The Magical Imperfect. This is not the cover, but there is an amazing cover that is coming soon. And I just to read, because if I just say what it's about, I'll go off, but I wrote down a quick synopsis, which is set against the backdrop of the 1989 San Francisco earthquake, which is historical, unbelievable. San Francisco earthquake in a town of refugees who came to America via Angel Island. The middle grade novel in verse is about a boy who's selectively mute and a girl who won't leave her house because of a skin condition, and the magical Jewish clay that allows them to help each other. So super excited. And I want to just do one shout out. I have also a story coming out in a YA, young adult anthology called Everybody Shines from Bloomsbury, and part of an incredible collection. And I have a short story in there called Food is Love. And I'm just, it's going to be really great. And that comes out, I believe, in March.
So awesome.
What about you?
So what about me? So, okay. So first of all, I agree with you. So I've written a lot actually during the pandemic because I don't have as much of a commute anymore, but I would say that it's been writing in fits and starts. Like sometimes I'll just be like, oh, I'm writing a lot. And I've been, revising, you know, for editors and stuff like that. So that's kind of part of it. But I've been writing new stuff. And part of what I did was I just allowed myself to do whatever the heck I wanted to do for a while. Like I was like, you want to look at poetry? That's fine. Learn how to write this kind of poem. That's awesome. Just like write lots of those kinds of poems and really bad ones sometimes. And that's fine. And then sometimes I would just, you know, so I've been working on picture books. I'm working on a new novel, and then I'm revising other stuff. But I'm trying to just be kind to myself because it's bananas out there. And sometimes it's hard to, for me, writing almost always comes from a place of joy. So like if I can't find the joy, sometimes it's really hard, but then I'll just go do something mechanical. I'll do line edits on something. I'm like, that I can do. Right. And then in terms of stuff coming out, so that is my debut picture book that is coming out October 20th with Leonardo Books, and it's called Seven Golden Rings, and it is set in ancient India, and it's about this boy named Bhagat who is poor, and he wants to earn a place in the Raja's musical troupe as a singer to kind of ensure the prosperity of his family. And he goes to the Raja city to audition, and all he has with him are a single coin and a chain of 7 golden rings. And he has to stay at an inn, but he doesn't know how many nights he's going to have to stay. And the innkeeper wants 1 ring per night. And he doesn't want to give all 7 to him because what if he only needs to stay for 2? So he can separate the rings, but 1 coin will get you 1 link broken. So how is he going to pay 1 ring per night while breaking only 1 link? So there's like a little math puzzle at the heart of this, and an author's note that explains the basics of binary numbers, which is, hey, why not?
It's
so that's
it's
really
so good. Yeah.
So that's fun. That's coming in October, and then I have a middle grade novel in verse. I'm like walking in your shoes, coming in February. And it's called Red, White, and Whole. and it is set in 1983, which is also historical, which is very disturbing to me. And it's about the 13-year-old daughter of Indian immigrants who feels caught between the worlds of her parents and their Indian community and kind of school and 1980s pop culture. There's lots of 80s songs referenced in this book. And then her mother becomes really ill and she feels caught or torn in a different way. So yeah, that is like a book of my heart, and I'm like so excited to share that with the world.
It's so
And
timely and so good. I can't wait for the world to see that book. Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you. One of the things I did because all last year I was thinking about writing a novel in verse, and so I read every novel in verse that I could get my hands on. Yeah. And yours was like such a model for me, Chris. So I have to thank you for that. And then in June, also a June book with your June book is the companion novel to MIDSUMMER'S Mayhem, which is Much Ado About Baseball. And it is set in the same town with a different set of magical people and a different set of kids, but it's about a girl and a boy who are both math competition rivals who end up on the same summer baseball team, and they can't stand each other, but then they have to find a way to work together for the good of the team.
So much fun.
I can't wait for all this stuff. And then I'm so excited to be in the same month as you, like publishing in the same month as you, Chris.
Well, I hope we get to kind of relive an actual, I mean, us along with the whole world, that we get to travel again and do all the things, you know, in whatever way is safe, whatever way is good, that we get to actually do that again.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah. I know.
Yay! Yay! So I think we're kind of like out of time. I don't know.
Yes, sadly.
We did it. Yeah.
You are right. It is that time of the night. So I just want to say thank you both to Chris and Rajani so much for joining us and for sharing your amazing stories with us and all of the good things that you've got coming out. Also, thank you so much to everyone who attended. All of your positivity and everything in the comments was just so appreciated very, very much. Your questions, everything. But we are going to go ahead and say goodnight to everyone. Have a good night, everybody.